when people are asking me about the homeless portion of my journey, what they're really asking is, where did you lose yourself?
Mm.
And then how did you find yourself? And I lost myself in the caretaking of other people.
Mm.
Somewhere along that time, Steve Meyer came to me, pulled me out the framing cruise like he had done so many times before, and asked me two really powerful questions. And the first question he asked me is, what is the difference between a rich man and a poor man? And as a teenager, I went, well, duh, it's money. Of course, it's got to be money. And I tell people all the time, you literally thought he would have slapped me in the back of my head if he could have. Like I felt like he wanted to pop me because he was like, no, kind of thing. He said it's the way they think.
Mm.
And he said the next thing he said is, which actually was more heart-centered question. This really hit me in the heart. He said, do you want to continue thinking like your father, or do you want to learn to think like me? That was probably the first moment that I realized I had a choice. And I think one of the things your audience needs to know more than anything else, at any given moment right now, they have a choice.
Mm.
We like to tell ourselves we don't have choices. We like to tell ourselves that the circumstances that we're currently experiencing, whether good or bad, are going to be our permanent circumstances. And that's just not how life works. And Steve taught me to live in the gray a little bit. And that was the beginning of understanding kind of who I wanted to be when I grew up.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Root, Realign, and Rise podcast, where we explore what it truly means to root in truth, realign with what matters, and rise with responsibility in leadership and in life. Today's conversation is about a tension that many leaders feel, but don't always know how to name. How do you build something meaningful without losing yourself in the process? Because success alone is not the goal. Sustainable leadership is. My guest today is Stephen Scoggins, a battle-tested business strategist, a best-selling author, and the founder of Unstoppable Solutions. From homelessness to building and exiting multiple companies, Stephen has become one of the fastest-growing entrepreneurs recognized by USA Today and the Wall Street Journal. With over 48 million podcast views and a global platform, he now works with high-capacity leaders to scale their impact without sacrificing who they are in the process. His work centers on what he calls integrated success, building a life and business, and actually holds under pressure. Stephen, I'm so happy to have you here on the show. Thank you for being here.
It's a sincere joy. Super excited to hang out with you. And thanks for such a kind, generous introduction. That's very generous. Thank you.
You know, you've actually done some amazing work, so pat your own self on the back.
It wasn't always fun work.
No, I don't think, work, they say that it's not always supposed to be fun. I think that's where the
Yeah.
growth is, which is really why I wanted to have you on the show, because really your story is impressive to me. And I think that a lot of people can really, in certain ways, resonate. Maybe we don't all come from homelessness, which is a very scary place to be, but it is a place that we all fear. Instability is one that is, as an entrepreneur, or even just anybody working in the working field, is something that we all have fears for. So I would love for you to kind of share a little bit of who you were back in that time where you were homeless, and kind of like show us and lead us through the process of what got you into doing what you do now. I think it's multiple steps, but tell us who you were back in that time of homelessness.
Oh gosh, what's really interesting is I've as you can imagine, I've been asked that one question a few times. It seems to be the one that everybody's like, "Oh, that's interesting." I'll tell you this much. I think early on, I think I was a lot like a lot of would-be entrepreneurs and business leaders. And this is early days, right? You don't realize how much of your upbringing or your knowledge of self or your self-worth or any of those things are really shaping you, or playing a role in shaping you on a regular basis. And at least for me, essentially 9 years old, my grandmother comes to me, who was raising me at the time. My parents were kind of like battling their own things. I hate to say the word demons because I don't like to say people have demons per se. So I'm very careful with my words, but they were definitely working through their own challenges, um, albeit their own challenges from their own childhood, things that were kind of like, in front of them. And, so they had a divorce fairly early on, and somehow ended up with my grandmother, my little brother and I. And around 9 years old, I literally have a GI Joe in one hand and Transformer in the other. Bumblebee was kicking Snake Eyes' butt, and my grandmother comes up to me. She has big tears in her eyes, and here's a woman that had been largely loving, nurturing, compassionate, pretty much any motherly kind of aspect that you could think of as the relationship I had with my grandmother. And when she came up to me, without going into too much detail or saying to me, where she basically let me know she had cancer in her own way, right? Age appropriate for a 9-year-old. Now, if you think about a 9-year-old, A lot of your viewers and listeners will probably have children at that age or have had children at that age. Your cognitive ability is not necessarily thinking about adult practices, right? Um, Unfortunately for us, the dynamic was such a way that it didn't allow for a lot of flexibility as far as other people watching me, my little brother, or having a lot of help. She was essentially a full-time mother, albeit our grandmother. And I think with tears in her eyes, she basically kind of asked me to step into the gap. And I think that's about the time that my true childhood basically ended, and from that moment on, she began to teach me how to, basically create food, anything with milk or water, right? And with anything I could cut with a butter knife, basically, nothing too dangerous, but nothing too serious. But I began making breakfast, lunch, and dinner, pretty much anytime I wasn't in school. I began getting my little brother up, who was 3 years younger than me at the time, Ryan, and I'm 9, so he's 6, getting us dressed, walking the, 3.5 blocks of school in Wendell, North Carolina, um, and when we weren't in school or weren't at home and I wasn't trying to play a bit of a helper role with my grandmother, and I basically was her crutch, right? She literally had me kind of be her crutch, literally on the phone, or not on the phone, be her crutch, if you will, on the, walking through the house in and out, and as a result, it kinda led me in a position of growing up super fast. The reason I start with that story is because a lot of times when people are asking me about the homeless portion of my journey, what they're really asking is, where did you lose yourself?
Mm. Yeah.
And then how did you find yourself? And I lost myself in the caretaking of other people.
Mm.
And when I think about the journey, essentially when my grandmother passes away, a couple years later, I immediately went to go live with my father. My brother went with my mother, so we were kind of split up as children. My mother and brother went to Florida. I stayed in North Carolina, went to a place called Fuquay in Marina, North Carolina. And, yeah, that's exactly how the city talks there. And how my family still talks to this day. I'm not sure why I have less of an accent, but hey, go figure.
I hear it a little.
Yeah, it comes out every now and again, especially if I say water or heel, y'all. Um, yeah, but, in the grand scheme, I went to go work construction weekends, nights, holidays. If I wasn't in school, I was working. And I'm 11 years old. At one time getting paid a quarter for every stud, and that fast became $1 an hour because I moved a lot of studs. And 8 foot 2x4 basically as a stud. And ultimately led me to meet the man that would become my first mentor. And he was my dad's employer. And in all the family dynamic, I would it's funny because when your lights and your water are getting shut off on a regular basis and all these types of things are happening, you kind of feel like you're at the poverty level for sure.
Yeah.
Right? And that was essentially the kind of environment, and my dad went and became pretty successful in a short amount of time working for this old man, Mark, or Steve Mark, as I tell people all the time, and what was really interesting was Steve took a liking to me at each of these job sites, and then within a few years, I guess he had poured into my dad. My dad built a business with his, now ex-wife's father and building homes, and, so we went from having some stuff to not having some stuff, and back to having some stuff, and back to not having some stuff, and this yo-yo used to, like, drive me crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I couldn't figure out where stability was gonna come from. And at the age of 17, I dropped out of high school to help my father turn the lights back on, get the water kinda come back on, and pay a bill. Had my '69 Mustang that I had was my first car, and paid for, like, $600 for the whole thing, and had to having to sell that to try to make a mortgage payment, and lo and behold, the reality is we lost everything that you would think would, like, threaten or project your stability in the grand scheme of things, and somewhere along that time, Steve Meyer came to me, pulled me out the framing crews like he had done so many times before, and asked me 2 really powerful questions. And the first question he asked me is, "What is the difference between a rich man and a poor man?" And as a teenager, I went, "Well, duh, it's money. Of course, it's gotta be money."
Mhm.
And I tell people all the time, you literally thought he would have slapped me in the back of my head if he could have. Like, I felt like he wanted to pop me because he was like, "No," kind of thing. He said, "It's the way they think."
Mm.
And he said the next thing he said is, which actually was more heart-centered question. This really hit me in the heart. He said, "Do you wanna continue thinking like your father, or do you wanna learn to think like me?"
Wow.
Now, Steve Mark is a man who was very successful. He was a s pro What he was self-proclaimed, but a self-made man. He also grew up with a difficult upbringing. He actually used to work for my grandfather, ironically, my dad's father. Somehow the roles got reversed due to alcoholism and some other things. My grandfather survived Pearl Harbor, so obviously that was long before we knew what PTSD was and all the things, and that was probably the first moment that I realized I had a choice. And I think one of the things your audience needs to know more than anything else, at any given moment right now, they have a choice.
Mm.
We like to tell ourselves we don't have choices. We like to tell ourselves that the circumstances that we're currently experiencing, whether good or bad, are going to be our permanent circumstances, and that's just not how life works.
Yeah.
And Steve taught me to live in the gray a little bit, and that was the beginning of understanding kind of who I wanted to be when I grew up. So he puts me in business for myself the very first time, buys me all the things that I need, ran my back office, all the things that I mean, I basically just had to show up and do work more than anything else, right? And like any teenager, I was like 19 at the time, any teenager who makes a ton of money really fast, but has never been either taught or seen it modeled on how to use that money, it does something special to the psyche. For example, people when I dropped out of high school, especially my close friends and allies, they were all telling me, "Hey, you're never going to be anything," right? Which hit me directly in the self worth gut.
Yeah.
And I've been getting hit in the self worth gut ever since I was 9 years old, trying to take care of everybody else. Right? I think there was even a part of me in my youth that ultimately thought I was the cause
Mm.
of my parents' divorce at some level, right? Because parents, especially when you're young, parents aren't really communicating the dynamic behind their marriage,
Yeah.
right? All you know is mom and dad are fighting, mom and dad are leaving or splitting up, and it's one of the things I keep telling people, and this is super important too, in case somebody's laid on the fence right now with that specific relationship. I want to encourage you to think bigger than yourself because what I've discovered is from a faith lens, the devil is not after your marriage.
Mm.
The devil is after generations hidden inside of your marriage.
That's powerful.
Every single broken home came from let's say every single, the vast majority of broken homes came from a original broken home. Not having things modeled, we find ourselves searching for significance and meaning and worth and all these different things. And I think that was part of my journey. So ultimately, I go and make a bunch of money. Um, get very cocky, very arrogant, very braggadocious, very I've been told I've always had a bit of a big personality.
Mhm.
Thank God, I think it's turning more into presence than personality, thank God. But I was probably one of God's more stubborn children, and I had lots of warnings along the way, that I needed to really get rooted and really be grateful for the opportunity that I had afforded to me, especially at such a young age.
Yeah.
Because when I was 19, I was probably making well over 6 figures as a 19-year-old kid. And this is back in 1997, 97, 98, which is a lot of money then.
Mhm.
Like and I thought I was the stuff, right?
Yeah.
In true God form, he sends a brown hair, brown eyed girl into my life and taught me about what it really meant to chase identity and significance and all the things. And ended up in a very depressed state and largely walked away from that opportunity. And I needed it, to be honest. I pray your audience doesn't need that level of humbling to become more of who they are, who they should be. But for me, that was my journey. And I was probably homeless for 4 to 6 months. To me, all the time, it's hard to know for sure because so much of it is a blur,
Yeah.
right? Days get jumbled together. You're not like you're looking at a calendar. You don't have a lot of things around you. Fortunately for me, I had a paid in full membership to a gym called World's Gym in Raleigh, North Carolina, that used to be off of Falls Loose Road. It's, I think, a Trader Joe's or something now, but um, that afforded me the ability to take showers and kind of look like I was still okay. And most of my family and my friends, they had no idea what I was going through. And because of my ego and my pride and my arrogance, I wasn't going to tell them. So my particular journey to homelessness wasn't really substance abuse. It wasn't any kind of real form of addiction. I think my discovery process is I just didn't know who I was.
Mm.
And I had to find that word from the inside out.
You mentioned that you really had to kind of find your gray, and I'm so curious
Mhm,
because, in those moments, not only do we have to find ourselves, we also have to lose a part of ourselves.
mhm. Yeah.
Some of that you talk about the ego. Were there other
Mhm,
things that you had to walk through that took you from the 9-year-old responsible boy who, you knew you had to be, that, you learned how to be just by
mhm.
having it put in your face, to becoming this man and this leader who you are now? What
Yeah.
what are some of those things? Because I think the thing that I'm wondering is as those have an audience, there are those out there that aren't going to have the fortunate opportunity to have the mentor that you had, or to have
Mhm.
somebody to kind of help give that little step up. So, what were some of those things that you could give an insight in that you had to lose or you had to gain?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do a slight reframe.
Okay.
The reframe is you're not losing, you're shedding.
Mm, I like that.
There Yeah, there's an old talk, I think it was Michelangelo that was said somebody asked him, again, I don't know if this is a story, it could be made completely made up or it could be history, but, it's said that Michelangelo once was carving, an angel out of marble, and someone asked him, is like, "Why are you doing that?" or "How are you doing that?" And, his response was, "I'm not carving an angel, I'm setting the angel free, but in order to set the angel free, I have to chip away at all the things that shouldn't be there."
Mm,
And I find that life business is a lot like that. For example, one of the things I've been telling a lot of business leaders, and when I say this, I'm gonna give you 2 phrases. Before I say the 2 phrases, I want everyone listening and watching to actually think about what I just said, and then see how it applies, because I find that when I'm working with business leaders, because I work with high capacity leaders as we speak, right? It could be someone who's just busting through the seven-figure ceiling or about to, all the way up to people that are already well above anything I've ever made income-wise. I've worked with a handful of 10-figure earners as well. Different, not on business practices specifically.
mhm,
Um, but they all have this in common. And when I look into the landscape, into the world right now, I see this in common as well.
mhm,
And the first statement is you can't scale dysfunction.
mm,
You can't scale it. All the things that you're avoiding doing is what's preventing you from moving forward. The conversations you're avoiding having, the systems you're avoiding putting in, the honest look in the mirror that you're avoiding looking at, the relationships that shouldn't be there, that maybe you should open yourself up to larger relationships. And we tell ourselves a variety of different self lies. We're serving this person, we're trying to train that person, and I feel like the biggest ministry field for businesses is actually not supposed to be your team. It's supposed to be the community at large, and the reason being is because if you were seeing your internal business as a ministry field by itself, you're going to allow dysfunction in the false perceptions that you're helping your team.
yeah.
Okay. What I've discovered that actually helps the team is holding yourself to a higher standard, creating systems and processes that have very high standards, and that either the team member fits or they don't. And I say that with love because statistically, there's a statistical average, and I'll come back to the second thing in just a second. But the statistical average is that by the time you go from $0 to $1 million, you'll have about 90+% of your team intact. Okay, whoever you pick up along the way, you hired this person, you hired that person, you did this, you did that. From 1 million to 10 million, you'll lose 25% of that. From 10 million to 50 million, you lose another 30% of that. From 10 million to 50 million, you're going to lose another 25 to 30% of that. By the time you go from zero to $100 million top line organization on an annual basis, you're lucky if you even have 1% of your team left.
Wow.
It's because people, if the leader themselves is growing, the business is by osmosis going to grow. And I will take me to the second point in just a second. Um, but if the business is growing because the leader is growing, but the team is not growing with the business will outgrow the team.
Mm,
These are the team members that don't want to learn something new. Right now, there's actually a lot of roadway on ramp, if you will, for people to learn AI stuff.
mhm,
Okay, become an AI administrator. Like stop looking at your role as a widget work and start looking at, okay, how would I train an AI to do this? So then you become an AI manager that's going to manage that widget work.
mhm.
One of the things I'm telling business leaders right now, specifically as it relates to business and AI, is don't look at replacing your team with AI. Look at training your team to operate AI, and then just don't grow your team. Like, take the same 5 people, 10 people, 20 people, have them all operate, but then have the business be able to take on more capacity because the business can sustain more capacity. So you can take the same small team and do double the effort when you don't have human error and redundancies broken into the play. Okay, so I shed that as a bit of a tangent, but it's because I want business leaders to be on it. But the second thing is with not scaling dysfunction, that's vitally important that people understand, and this will take me to the transition, is if it's true you can't scale dysfunction, by definition, that means you have to begin casting out chaos wherever you can find it,
Mm,
including if that's in your own heart. Because every leader that I've seen been stuck, every last one, including myself, like every time I look at the major bottleneck that prevented my company, my organization to go to the next thing, it was always me. Who I was hiring, that was my choice. What systems I was using, that was my choice. How I was using financial resources, that was my choice. How I was showing up as a leader, that was my choice. But we like to blame it on other things
yeah.
in general. Okay. So this is another one that I want people to fully appreciate. This is the second of the first two things I mentioned to you that is really important that they'll get nothing else from this conversation. The first one is you can't scale dysfunction. And the second one is your business will always be the embodiment of your internal world.
Mm.
Your business will always be a mirror. If you don't like the mirror has to change, which means you have to change the thing that's actually projecting the image in the first place, you. I say that to say that in order to avoid scaling dysfunction and cast out chaos for good, you have to become one part lion and one part lamb. Okay. Now that sounds really cliche and beautiful on the surface. Let me unpack it just a little bit. If you go back and look at we'll use a faith reference just for it's easier to communicate the point. And I just invite your audience, if they don't share my faith, that's totally cool. But just hear the story from it. In the Bible, there's two kings. Okay. The first book of Samuel, first Samuel specifically. This first king is the first king of Israel. They're asking for this king. The Israelites are asking for this king. Okay. They're like, we want a king like every other nation. We want. Almost like you'd have a child come and be like, Mom, I want this. Daddy, I want this. Mommy, I want this. Right? They don't know what they don't know. They just want what they want because it's a self-interest, right? It doesn't make the child bad, doesn't make the Israelites bad. Just very misinformed. Okay. So much so that, in this frame of reference, God shows up and says, all right, fine, I'm gonna give you a king. And the guy's big and he's strong. He unites the 12 tribes of Israel. He goes on to be like super successful, but then becomes very disobedient. Okay. He begins taking advantage of the tribes. He begins seeing himself as powerful and, inflated and all this kind of stuff. And ultimately, God decides to strip the kingship from him and give the kingship to a shepherd boy. Okay. Also known as King David. King David, outside of Yeshua or Jesus, was known as being the most successful king that has ever reigned. Okay. Here's the contrast. When I look at organizations and business leaders and I look at what they're building and how um, they're building their business and their systems and everything around the symptoms of the business. All right. I promise I'll stitch all this together.
Nope, you got it.
the the businesses by public persona, by public reporting, okay, have the same 5 or 6 things that rotate every year. Okay. Lack of funding,
Mhm.
poor marketing or poor market fit, product positioning, lack of leadership, and quality team development. Okay. Those are like the ones that just kind of go up and down, up and down. And they, on average, you're like, well, there's 80% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. Well, how come that stat hasn't changed yet?
Good question.
Right? Have you ever asked yourself? I mean, we're talking decades,
Yeah.
right? And here's why. It's because all those things are symptoms. All those things are symptoms. The sides of me that had to change were the sides that I think all leaders have to change. I call them the 5 constraints. Okay. Think about a constraint, a water hose, trying to get water out of you're out there trying to water something in the lawn or whatever, wash your car, and you're expecting the water to come out, and all of a sudden there's like nothing, but the water's on. And we all know that means that the water's kink somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
And then you go and find a kink, you undo the kink, you come back, and the water's still not out. You're like, what the heck's going on? You go back and find more kinks in the hose. It's not until you get all the kinks out of the hose that the water flows. Okay. Well, if we have to get all the kinks out of the hose to get the water to flow, your energy, your financial resources, your choices, your leadership operate identically to that. Okay. It's a parable, if you will. Okay. The 5 constraints are very simple: arrogance, ignorance, impatience, fear, and insecurity.
Can you say it?
These are
Eric.
arrogance, ignorance, impatience, fear, and insecurity.
I think those are so important to be heard.
These are the things that drive our behaviors. Now, these are the things that, and here's the cool thing. Once you're aware of them, you can begin to work on them. Okay. And I'm gonna go back to David and Saul here for just a second, but I'll tell you that I had to battle each of those 5, sometime all 5 at once, sometimes 2 or 3, until I became what I now call an integrated leader. Okay. And I'm gonna explain what that is as well. So Saul is what I would like to refer to as both the immature lion and the immature lamb. I'll give you an example. In Saul's immaturity, he was controlling, domineering, egotistical, and arrogant, and he was overly aggressive. Okay. He was known for hurling spears at David and killing people for hiding David and all these different things. Okay. He completely lost his way. Okay. At the same time, he was also the immature lamb. And when he was the immature lamb, essentially what he was running into and dealing with was he was also people pleasing. The whole reason he disobeyed God's direct order was because he wanted the people to approve of him. He liked the praise. In other words, he was so focused on looking the part that he totally forgot about being the part.
That external.
You see, you can't be looking and being at the same time.
Yeah.
Either you are or you're looking, right? The false sense of success. It's what drives hustle culture. Hustle culture is nothing more than anxious activity.
Mm.
And you're taking the anxious activity thinking that you're being productive. There's a big difference in being productive and anxious activity. Okay. Take David, on the other hand. David becomes a person in the Bible known as God, a man after God's own heart. Okay. What makes David a man after God's own heart? David was always one part worshiper and one part warrior simultaneously. What I mean by that? When you look at David's leadership, especially the early days, he had confidence, he had brilliance, he was bold, he was protective, he was kind. Okay. Which is basically the main characteristics of the mature lion. And by the way, we all have lion and lamb in us. We all have masculine and feminine qualities inside of us.
Right.
It's about finding the integration piece. On the lamb side, David was kind, he was compassionate, he was loving, he was grace-filled, mercy-filled, right? And out of that, he was able to tap into what's called divine wisdom, which is more of a feminine quality than even masculinity. Now, we dudes, we like to think that we're smart and we got all this stuff, but there's an intuition or an internal wisdom that, because of the synchronicity of trying to integrate the two, comes out of that most men have a hard time tapping into because we feel like we have to look the part. Okay. Just from being kids from the early days, we're taught we have to be the knight in the shining armor. We have to be the protector, the provider, and all the things. We're not taught it's okay to like let our guard down and take our armor off for a minute and just be present. Okay. So you look at David and you look at Saul, you're able to see a very quick contrast. Okay. So let's go back to the 5 constraints. What was the core difference between David and Saul? The 5 constraints. Because every constraint has an opposite. Arrogance, the opposite of arrogance is humility. The opposite of ignorance is teachability. The opposite of impatience is actually presence.
Mm.
You see, I talk to people all the time. I'm very fortunate to get to speak more to people now, and it seems like we're getting more and more great feedback and like things are happening. And ultimately, I ask this question many times when I've been speaking recently. By show of hands, everybody raise your hand real fast if you think you should be further ahead than you actually are.
Oh, I think everybody's gonna raise their hand.
Almost every time. And the only people that don't raise it are like, they go like this. They're like, I think I want to raise it, but I don't. Yeah, you don't want to be called out, right? It's human nature. It is human nature because most of us can't be where our feet are. However, if you can become a leader, a business leader that can become where your feet are with the problem that's in front of you, willing to make data-driven decisions because you're breathing into it, you're slowing down, you're not rushing yourself, you're going to make better choices. But if we operate inside of the constraints, we're going to be operating out of mainly fear and scarcity, which means we're making an emotional response to a logical problem.
Right.
Therefore, we think we're solving one problem because we're making knee-jerk reactions. Like they call it a gunfighter, pulling guns out left and right, just shooting everything. You're actually creating 10 more problems. And then you wonder why you're always like running around with your hair on fire and like you're the chief everything officer and nothing's working out and the team isn't doing this and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, dude, stop. Just stop. Just breathe.
Yeah.
Just breathe. Be present. Be exactly where your feet are. This also, I learned the presence, not through just divine inspiration that happened over the last 2 years, but more importantly, my oldest son came to me after a divorce, or as we announced the divorce. I thought I was going to go to him and empower, encourage him. And ironically, he sat me down. He said, as far as I'm concerned, Stephen, because I'm not their biological father, as far as I'm concerned, Stephen, you're a fantastic husband and a fantastic father. As far as I'm concerned, I watched,
Wow.
right? I love you. I modeled you. He said, but there's one thing you can do different, just one thing. He said, if you could just be more present when you're present.
Mm.
And out of that moment, I thought about all the times where I had to answer the email. I had to pick up the phone call. Like I would be at their events. Like I'm telling myself, I made it. Like I'm here. I'm actually physically, my body's here, but my heart and my mind are elsewhere. Right. All the conversations I missed, all these types of things. And I want to avoid that frustration for people because what we're saying in that moment to that child, to that next generation is this in front of me is more important than you are.
Or even to our employees in the office that we're leading.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Yep.
be there, but are you really leading properly? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And look, and to case in point, a lot of leaders are like, well, I don't have time to meet with everybody. I just don't. And that's where you're in the anxious activity phase.
Yeah.
It's not until you stop and slow down and actually take ownership of your calendar that your calendar begins to work for you, not against you. Most of us want to have all the excuses of why we can't.
Yeah.
So when people ask me, how did you go from homelessness to building an organization upwards of 9 figures in annual revenue? First of all, it wasn't easy. I'm just being honest with you.
Yeah.
I had to confront and deal with everything I've been talking about personally. But I did that ultimately by becoming an integrated leader and becoming more present when I was present. So when I'm here with you now, I've got all my dinging, buzzings, all the things are off, right? I've got meetings after this. I've got meetings tomorrow. I got travel. Like I've got all these things. And I'm not thinking about that because I've begun working on myself in such a way that I can be present in every moment,
Hmm.
right? And this is at the heart of the integrated leader. The only integrated leaders have the capacity
Yeah.
to increase their container. You can't increase your container unless you have increased capacity. And you can't increase the container to hold a new version of you, the new version of your business, new version of your family, etc. The biggest lie you'll ever tell yourself, and I've told myself this, is I'm doing this for everyone that I love. I'm building this for you. I'm gonna tell you right now, um, the most challenging moment that I ever had in my life outside of homelessness was also sitting on top of a mountain in a home by myself after exiting, having everything that you think you could want. I
What?
had financial resource, I could travel, I was on stages, I had all the things, and it was the most emptiest place I've ever had in my life. So everything that you think you're striving for right now, that is the real motivation that you're striving for. I'm saying this to you and you're telling this to your audience who's watching and listening. You're telling yourself a fib if you're telling yourself you're doing it for everybody else.
What I hear a lot of is that a lot of it is almost like this concept that we have to be in control of everything.
Mhm. Yeah.
When in really, if we just show up in each moment, we're right here, right now, not think about the past, not think about the future of what we're supposed to be doing, where we should be, where we want to go instead. If we really
Mhm.
presently and sit in the opportunity and live and lead that way,
Mhm.
I actually can tell you, even from my own experiences, how much that has changed my life with my health,
Mhm.
going
Yeah.
from, 90 pounds and bedridden for 3 years and, trying to force my health to come back. And the moment I just kind of gave up and allowed that to say, okay, let's just enjoy with what we have and take the
Mhm.
opportunities. And yeah, I think it's in every part of our lives. I appreciate that. Can you talk to me a little bit about the integration that you do? You have an I am integrated method framework that you use. And I believe you actually have a self assessment with that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Well, so the integrated alignment method is taking the attributes that I mentioned with the constraints and then making your way to their opposites.
Mm.
Every constraint has an opposite, and every constraint shows itself when you're trying to build and scale every time. Okay. Um, the evidence of constraints are oftentimes feel like burnout, overwhelm, relationship issues, team member issues, financial issues. Those are just evidence, symptoms of the fact that those constraints are currently occupying your life. The integrated alignment method, without going into too much detail in a short amount of time, I'll tell you starts with a presence practice. Okay. And I had to do this. So keep in mind, I'm on the disc of values and attributes. I'm a high D, right? Very A personality, very driven. Used to be aggressive. Now I consider myself more bold, right? So when someone says slow down, okay, that was not in my vocabulary. All that Amberly, our mutual friend Amberly, and other people that know me, Cameron, all these other, they know that I
Yeah.
move fast,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't until I began intentionally slowing down that things began to change. So I'm gonna tell you one quick story to tell you that thing. I'm trying not to go too long, for the sake of time, but there's a phrase in the Bible that's in the Psalms that says, "Be still and know that I am God."
Love that one.
Most of us have heard that.
Yeah.
And most of us envision, okay, I'm gonna go sit into a chair by myself in a room, and I'm gonna be still.
I'm gonna pray, meditate.
Mhm, and 2, 3 minutes into it, you're, like, fidgety and,
Can't
like, you gotta get
on the brain.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly, and ultimately, what's really going on is your nervous system doesn't know how to be still. Now, if you translate that I did this recently with a good friend of mine, Doug Elks. He came to the Safe Haven and the retreat center I'm having for entrepreneurs, um, and comes there, and I'm like, "Dude," like, he's been kicking butt doing this thing, right? All the beautiful things, and I was like, "Man, go to the dock. I just feel like God has something to share with you." right? Just walk out there. I said, it's 15 minutes. He'd come back like 30, 45 minutes later and he was like wrecked. I'm like, he talked to you, didn't he? He's like, uh-huh. Right. And what they talked about is for them to share publicly. But the beautiful thing was, is that they said, Doug, have you ever taken the time to take be still and know that I am God and look at it at the level of Hebrew or Paleo Hebrew?
Mm.
He's like, no, I haven't. He said, no. I said, nobody has. I'm one of the weird ones. We're going to do it right now. Let's do it fun. So we pull out the resources and I'm saying, okay, what does it really mean? It has a deeper, more beautiful message, meaning essentially it means to let go of all control and surrender all things to a presence that's bigger than yourself while dwelling within.
Mm.
So it's the settling of soul, not the settling of body. Okay. I can promise you that every wisdom thing that I've ever had, every new idea, every innovation came out of moments like that, not through anxious activity. And one is related, like presence, being still is a flow practice. Okay. Activity is a force practice. Okay. You can force stuff into existence, but it may, like Saul learned, it may not be what's actually good for you. Or you can show up with your best effort, with your full presence each and every time and let flow take over and it'll always be what's better for you. Okay. All right. I start off with a mantra every morning, right? Simple breath work in between. I'm healthy. I'm wealthy. I'm wise. I'm a steward of the Most High. And the one that was most difficult is I love you, Stephen.
Mm.
I encourage everyone to do that 4 times because most of us define our worth, which ultimately defines our wealth, by what others say about us rather than what we say about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Which means we intentionally spend our entire life striving for things we were never meant to be in the first place. And we completely avoid the thing that we're ultimately meant to be. Out of being the thing that you're supposed to be being becomes building the thing you're supposed to be building, and it prospers and it fulfills you. So I tell my people all the time, it's listening always precedes being always precedes doing, and doing always precedes becoming. Most of us want to become without even listening, let alone being or doing.
Mm.
Right? That takes me to the next step. The next step is to have what I call a journaling session that I started this 2 years ago. I did it every day consistently for 6 months straight, and the most powerful things happen. I'm getting testimonies or text messages or messages on Instagram for people who are doing this practice right now, and it's insane the feedback we're getting in a healthiest, beautiful, most beautiful version of insanity, right? It's this. I want you to grab your journal and grab your pen. I want you to go to the most safe place in the house when nobody else is around. I want you to, the very first thing in the morning before all the things wake up, even if you have to get up a few minutes earlier. Okay. I want you to grab a journal, open the page, and right at the top of the page, what I hear you say is.
Mm.
And I want you to jot the date down. Okay. And then I want you to sit with the intention of being present for the divine to come to you and through you. Sometimes you'll be there for a minute and you'll just start flowing. Other times you might be here for 10 minutes, but the principle is you don't get up until you hear.
I love
You're not asking. This is not praying. This is not meditating. This is not just settling of soul and trying to tap into a frequency. This isn't asking for God for our normal laundry list of things that we like to, can you please fix this? Can you please fix that? Can you please give me this? Give me that? Like we keep trying to turn God into a genie, and God is not a genie, right? This practice changes that perspective. Okay. The first time I did this was September 21st of 2024. And my heart was shattered in a million pieces. And I bled on paper, on a computer screen, technically, to God. And I got to the bottom of the document and I changed the font color blue. And I said, Lord, if there's anything you could share with me, please share it with me now, please. And I was correct, right? As soon as I said that and changed the font color blue, I could not type fast enough.
Mm.
I've actually read part of this journal on stage. I think you've seen me do it, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that comes out of this journey is, in this particular journaling session, he says, I'm always talking, but they're seldom listening. Like, keeping that in mind, all the needs, all the wants, all the desires, all the things that you think you're searching for in the world in front of you is already like right there for you.
Yeah.
But most of us won't sit still long enough. Okay. So the reason that works as part of the integration phase is because in order to go from one part lion, and become a one part lion and one part lamb in a mature capacity, away from immature capacity, is you have to start being really honest with yourself. And who better to be honest with you about the things that you need to talk about in love and grace and mercy, but with correction, if need be, other than the divine.
Yeah.
Only the divine knows how to talk to you in your unique way to kind of do that. So that's the starting point, right? Other things that are the integration practices, how you show up for your team. We do a free virtual event once a month called the 5 Critical Shifts, where we take the constraints, we break them apart, and do things like that in detail. But one of the first steps, you mentioned this earlier, I think could be really helpful is we have a tool, an assessment, a resource, if you will, that doesn't ask you to buy anything at the end of it. Okay, I'm not selling you crap, right? This is us building relationship and building trust. Is the essentially you go to stevenscoggins.com. So STEPHENSCOGGINS.com/leader. It's going to tell you exactly where you are on the one part lion, one part lamb framework, which ultimately is the constraints and where your blind spots are. And if you want to take advantage of going joining one of our free events that we do once a month, you can use that as a way to get there. But essentially, you have to become aware. Okay. And then the 4 phases of integration are alignment. So you have to become aware of what needs to be aligned, then you align it, then you integrate it, then you embody it, and now you can expand upon it. So align, integrate, embody, expand. You cannot expand before you do those 3 steps. If you do, you're scaling chaos and dysfunction, and by definition, getting in your own way.
Mm. I am truly in love with this conversation. Thank you so much. The journaling part, it's so interesting. We talk about journaling so much, but yet a lot of people will get stuck on that because of
Mhm,
one thing. Well, what do you talk about? And so
mhm,
I thank you just for that. And the self-assessment, all of that really truly is so needed. We will have that in the show notes. We will have the next steps and ways to connect to you. I believe that there are many out there. I know I could continue having this conversation all day with you. I've truly enjoyed it. Before we wrap, I want to remind everybody you don't have to be whole to lead. Leadership does not begin once everything is resolved. It begins when you root yourself in truth, you realign with what matters, and you choose to rise with that responsibility right where you are. Thank you so much for being with us, Stephen. I truly appreciate it, and we'll see you next time, everyone.